Oui, alors je peux parler français maintenant.
Novak Djokovic, Serbian tennis player, or tennisman en français, and winner of the 2021 French Open at Roland-Garros in Paris, has lived in Monaco for several years and speaks French. But, as we know, time spent living in a French-speaking country and French competency don't always correlate, especially if you are a tennis player who spends most of the year travelling around the world. Alors, Djoko, how is your French? Let's find out together, huh?
Merci beaucoup, c'était un plaisir.
Non, le plaisir est partagé. Du coup, tout le monde, si vous êtes prêts, allez, c'est parti. Alors, back in 2013, Djokovic gave an interview live on French TV, and the most impressive thing about this was, at least in my opinion, was how much he understood first time from a presenter who spoke to him at completely natural speed. He even told the translator in his ear to go away. I don't need you.
Alors, première question, comment allez-vous? On va rappeler que vous êtes blessé à la cheville. C'était assez impressionnant d'ailleurs. En Coupe Davis, votre participation était longtemps incertaine. Ça va beaucoup mieux là.
Oui, c'est beaucoup mieux. I don't need translation, thank you.
Keep that interview from 2013 in mind for context, because for the rest of this video, we're mainly going to be focusing on analysing the French that he spoke during a 2021 interview in the middle of the Roland-Garros French Open Championship. So let's look at the first clip.
Un grand ambition, je peux dire un grand goal pour arriver sur cette place historique, on peut dire, pour faire le record de 311 semaines.
Now we notice straight away that he has a pretty strong Serbian accent. It's clear that that has not been one of his priorities for him. I'm guessing that his French is more about being functional, getting done what he needs to do. He says, c'est une grande ambition. He should have said, c'est une grande ambition, because ambition is feminine. A trick to remember if something's feminine is if it is ending in T-I-O-N. It's a feminine noun. He says, une grande ambition. Not too serious, c'est pas grave. And then he says c'est un grand, and he couldn't think of the word for goal, so he went with the English word goal, un grand goal. And this is a bit funny because in the interview previously, okay, it was 8 years before, he knew the word for objectif, although he said objective.
Mon objectif est maintenant de parler français.
But anyway, we all forget words we don't use very often from time to time. And then he goes on to say on peut dire at the end of a sentence. It says, pour arriver à cette place historique, on peut dire. Now, this is a very French thing to say, and it's clear that he spent time in the language. On peut dire is like one could say what I just said. So when there's many ways to say something, perhaps, or it's you claiming something like that, it's your opinion, right? You say on peut dire or je peux dire, as he says earlier in the clip.
Pour arriver sur cette place historique, on peut dire, pour faire le record de 311 semaines qui était de Federer avant.
So it's something you tag on to the end of a claim or a sentence.
On peut dire pour faire le record.
So a mixed bag so far. Very strong Serbian accent when he speaks French, makes a couple of gender errors, misses a word, but then uses a very natural conversational phrase while he's speaking.
311 semaines qui était de Federer avant.
So in this clip, he deals with something which all of us learners struggle with at some point, is numbers, French numbers. The bigger the number, the longer you have to think about it because the rarer it is to say it. He looked for a few seconds, but he stayed calm. He said 311. 311 jours, the last record of Roger Federer. So that was pretty good. He took his time, he stayed calm, and that shows that he's used to having to take his time with French. Alors, Novak is speaking pretty good French. He's getting his point across, which is the first goal from any French interaction. But he's making plenty of mistakes that you or I would make when we speak French. Now, the best way I have found to iron out these mistakes is to first identify them and then be very intentional about how and when you use them in your future conversations. If you want to learn more about my method and my techniques for getting more progress and confidence out of each of your conversation sessions as a French learner, you can check out my guide and workbook down in the description below at the end of this video.
311 semaines qui étaient de Federer avant. Et après, oui, maintenant, je pense pas encore plus de ça. Je suis totalement concentré sur le Roland Garros. Évidemment que je suis très motivé de faire bien ici.
Now, after he talked about the number of days for the record, he then says, et après, je pense pas, blah, 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 blah. Et après, and it might mean literally after. The word après means after, but the French kind of use it to sort of just say, like, to move on to the next part of the story, the next thing that you're saying. It's like, après, after that, and the next thing is this, the next thing is this. They say, et après, je pense pas plus loin que ça. Basically, that's what he was saying. And then he uses another very French word, évidemment. Évidemment is like, of course, it goes without saying. Obviously, sometimes a bit less strong than obviously. So évidemment. So very French ways of speaking, again, comes with exposure to the language and mimicking people. So very good there.
Et après, oui, maintenant, je pense pas encore plus de ça.
And then he says, je suis très motivé de faire bien ici. Je suis très motivé de faire bien ici. Little mistakes here. It's motivé à faire quelque chose, or faire plus the adverb. Motivé à instead of motivé de. And then when you have the infinitive form of a verb, i.e. the non-conjugated form, so in this case it's faire after motivé de faire. If you want to say well, he said bien, you have to put the bien before the verb. Je suis motivé à bien faire ici. Je suis motivé à bien faire ici. And this is different from when you actually got the conjugated form of the verb. So you say je fais bien, the adverb goes after the conjugation. But when it's the infinitive form of a verb, the adverb, in this case, bien, goes before. Je suis motivé à bien faire ici.
Je suis très motivé de faire bien ici.
In this next clip, he's talking about how he used to imitate the players on the tennis tour a lot. And he said, after a while, I stopped because people were asking me everywhere, all the public and the media were asking me everywhere to imitate such or such player. So let's listen to what he says.
Tout le public et tous les gens me demandaient fais un peu d'imitation de Nadal. Et à un moment, j'ai vraiment j'ai arrêté. Mais c'est belle. C'était 2007, je pense, donc 15 ans déjà passé.
So the thing I want to pick out from this clip is that he says, à un moment, j'ai arrêté. À un moment, j'ai arrêté. Now, very strong with he doesn't master the French R at all, arrêté or arrêté with his rolled R, but it should be arrêté. But we're not here to focus too much on his pronunciation because it's more about communication, which he does very well. He says, à un moment, j'ai arrêté. Now, it should be à un moment donné, which means literally at a given moment, but it means like at some point. If you want to say in French at some point in the future or in the past, you say à un moment donné. Really useful French phrase, and I was really happy to learn it because I realized in many of my interactions I was getting stuck. I was like, I want to say that. And you say à un moment donné. Or you could just say un jour, one day, to keep it simple.
Tout le public et tous les gens me demandaient fais un peu d'imitation de Nadal. Et à un moment, j'ai vraiment j'ai arrêté. J'étais fier, mais aussi j'étais vraiment comment dire tired, no, exhausted.
Épuisé.
So Novak demonstrates a very important skill for us French learners or foreigners who are learning to speak French or any other foreign language need to master, and that is the ability to put our ego aside and ask how to say a word in French if we don't know it, because we're regularly going to come across words that we don't know, so we need to have a tactic to deal with it. One of those tactics is to ask. How do we say it? Now, in this case, he trusted that the presenter knew how to speak English and would help him. He says, comment dire, tired or exhausted. Now, the host knew it wasn't just fatigué, it was épuisé. épuisé. She told him, he's like, yes, épuisé. And then things moved on. Very, very important and underrated skill to have and be willing to use.
J'étais fier, mais aussi j'étais vraiment, comment dire, tired, no? Exhausted.
Épuisé.
Then he goes on to saying that playing Roger Federer is something that requires a lot of concentration, which is an understatement, I'm sure. But in French, it's interesting to note that you use the verb demander, which doesn't mean demand. You've probably seen it and learned that it means to ask. But if you didn't know, now you do. It means to ask, but it also means it requires. So you could say, ça demande beaucoup de concentration. Ça demande beaucoup de concentration. I couldn't actually hear the grammatical subject he used here, but anyway, a good sentence would be ça demande beaucoup de concentration. Interesting use of demander.
Et puis c'est oui, parce que jouer contre lui à Londres, à Wimbledon, c'est pas facile parce qu'on demande beaucoup de concentration. J'ai perdu, je pense, deux fois ou trois fois en finale avant 2016.
He says, j'ai perdu 2 ou 3 fois en finale. J'ai perdu 2 ou 3 fois en finale. And it's hard not to say fois because you're already saying trois, but it's fois. It's trois because of the R, trois, and then fois. So 2 or 3 times in the final. They don't say dans la finale, they say en finale. When the French are in the World Cup final, for example, they say on est en finale, on est en finale. So he lost 2 or 3 times in the final.
Arriver en cette position de gagner Roland Garros, c'était très long pour moi. J'ai perdu, je pense, deux fois ou 3 fois en finale avant 2016.
Voilà, that is my décortiquage, my breakdown of the French of Novak Djokovic, or at least the bits that I found most useful to pick out. What did you think? I'm going to give him a score of 13 out of 20. He's very functional. He communicates his point. He obviously has charisma and confidence to go on French TV, not just now, but 8 years ago. But I don't think he's really moved on from the level that he was at 8 years ago. So I take that to be because he travels a lot and he uses French just when he needs it. But still, very good level, very good communicator. What is your score? Quel est le score que vous donnerez à Novak Djokovic? 13 out of 20 for me. Let me know down in the comments below. Let's start a little contest. Remember that if you want to get more out of your conversations as a French learner, then don't hesitate to check out my guidebook and workbook, I never know what to call it, down in the description below the video, and start getting more out of your conversations in French. If you want to check out the full interviews that I have used in today's video, then I've put a link to those down in the description as well. Merci beaucoup à vous, Djoko, de nous avoir permis d'analyser votre français aujourd'hui.
Merci beaucoup, c'était un plaisir. Merci.
Et merci beaucoup à vous tous de m'avoir rejoint aujourd'hui ici sur YouTube. Je vous reverrai la semaine prochaine pour une nouvelle vidéo. N'hésitez pas à laisser un like si la vidéo vous a plu. Mais jusqu'à la prochaine fois, au revoir.